Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Raisha Sehgal. On World DNA today, New York police has raided Hamilton Hall, which has been occupied by demonstrators in Columbia University. This after pro-Palestinian demonstrators broke through the windows of the building, while the college has threatened to expel students involved. Well, New York City Mayor Eric Adams insisted that the takeover was instigated by outside agitators. We'll of course be tracking that very closely on the show today.
Also, we bring you the latest on what's happening in the Israel-Hamas front. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel will launch an invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah, regardless of truce talks with Hamas. And this comes after the US renewed warnings against a Rafah invasion unless civilians are properly protected. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has arrived in Israel to push for a ceasefire. We are going to be tracking those developments closely. Let's take a look at the headlines first.
NYPD officers enter the second floor of Hamilton Hall in Columbia University building that has been occupied by students demonstrating Israel's war in Gaza.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in Israel to push for a much-awaited ceasefire between Israeli forces and Hamas in Gaza.
Netanyahu vows Rafah offensive with or without a Hamas truce. This as attempts are being made to try to reach an agreement for a ceasefire and hostage release.
58% of Israelis believe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should resign immediately, including 28% of those who voted for the bloc that supports Netanyahu. This, according to a poll by broadcaster N12.
New York judge finds former U.S. President Donald Trump for repeatedly violating the gag order in the hush money trial. Also threatens jail if Trump willfully violates the gag order again.
UK returns a first failed asylum seeker to Rwanda under a voluntary removals program. Under the scheme, migrants whose claims are rejected are offered up to £3,000 to move to the East African country.
"11 days after the end of the Phase 1 and 4 days since Phase 2, India's poll panel releases voter turnout data. 84% of parliamentary constituencies see declines of varying magnitude in turnout figures. The campus chaos in the US is escalating. Dozens of demonstrators took over a building at Columbia University in New York. Moreover, New York Police Department NYPD personnel have entered Hamilton Hall.
And they've also arrested several protesters. Now, a Columbia University spokesperson has said that the demonstrators who broke into Hamilton Hall were led by people not affiliated with the university. US President Joe Biden says he opposes the seizure of the campus building. These are images from Columbia University. And earlier protesters entered Hamilton Hall, the site of student protests dating back to the 1960s. The protesters also barricaded the entrances.
And these are live visuals coming in from the Columbia University, where the police have barricaded the Hamilton building there. The demonstrators, meanwhile, also unfurled a Palestinian flag out of a window in the latest escalation of demonstrations against the Israel-Hamas war that have spread to college campuses nationwide.
The New York City Mayor Eric Adams insisted that the takeover was instigated by outside agitators, and all the people that are taking part in the demonstrations, they are not part of the university. They are not all students, and that means that there is going to be heavy action which one can expect from the New York Police Department.
Just a short while ago, the NYPD officers entered the Hamilton Hall, where the demonstrators have been entrenched since storming the building overnight. And we can see a slew of people, students outside the building where the NYPD personnel have entered the Hamilton Hall. Well, just a short while before speaking about the situation at Columbia, New York Mayor Eric Adams blamed external factors for co-opting what should have been a peaceful protest. And there we can see the NYPD personnel entering the Hamilton building through the window.
The protesters had in fact broken through the windows, and there are visuals of the police officials scathing through those windows from which the protesters had entered. Here we see them using a makeshift ladder to enter the premises. NYPD officers, they used an elevated ramp which we showed you on screen just moments earlier. They entered the second floor of Hamilton Hall in the university building that has been occupied by students and external factors, as the New York City Mayor mentioned, protesting Israel's war in Gaza. The police department acted after receiving a letter from the administration authorizing them to enter the campus, and this is as per a law enforcement source. Heavy action, of course, taking place at the university campus, and one is expecting this to escalate further as there are external elements involved.
And these are live visuals coming from the Columbia University. We can see demonstrators holding Palestinian flag, chanting against Israel's war in Gaza. The NYPD personnel have entered the Hamilton building there through the staircase, and they've barricaded the building. Just a short while ago, Columbia University released a statement that the hall was occupied, vandalized and blockaded, after which the NYPD personnel entered the area.
Days earlier, there were over 100 arrests which took place right here at Columbia University, and that is what also spiraled these protests towards several other universities across the US. But of course, the hub still remains here at Columbia University, where things have spiraled to a new level altogether at the moment.
We can see some arrests that have already been made at the moment at the Columbia University.
Dozens of people have been arrested. They were zip-tied and escorted to awaiting NYPD buses. These are the reports that are coming in at the moment. We are going to be tracking those developments coming in from Columbia University closely. For now, let's get you some other updates. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in Israel with plans to discuss the truce and increased flow of aid into Gaza.
Well, Blinken is expected to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. Earlier, Blinken said that Israel is planning on opening a major humanitarian aid crossing into hard-hit northern Gaza. Blinken saw off a first Jordanian truck convoy of aid heading to Gaza through the Erez crossing reopened by Israel.
He added that he will press Netanyahu on Gaza aid measures and ceasefire talks.
The Israelis have put a strong proposal on the table. They've demonstrated that they're willing to compromise. And now it's on Hamas. And no more delays, no more excuses. The time to act is now.
However, hours before he landed in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to launch a ground offensive into Gaza's southernmost town of Rafah, and that too with or without a deal to halt the fighting and release Israeli hostages.
No ICC action will impact Israel's ironclad determination to achieve the goals of our war with Hamas terrorists. We will destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities in Gaza. We will release all our hostages, and we will ensure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again.
Netanyahu is facing pressure from far-right allies to reject a new Gaza ceasefire.
If you decide to raise a white flag and cancel the order to occupy Rafah immediately in order to complete the task of destroying Hamas and to restore security to the residents of the South and to the citizens of Israel and to return all our abducted brothers and sisters to their home, the government headed by you will have no right to exist.
Well, Rafah is the main entry point for getting desperately needed aid into Gaza. This is where the United Nations says 100% of the population is at severe levels of food insecurity. More than 1 million Palestinian civilians have been driven into Rafah, with many living in sprawling tent camps. Israel says Rafah is Hamas's last major stronghold in the Gaza Strip.
Reacting to Netanyahu, the UN's humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths said that a ground operation by Israeli troops in the southern Gaza city of Rafah would be a tragedy beyond words. Now, Washington has joined calls on Israel from other countries and humanitarian organizations to spare the city. They fear that an army incursion on the ground would lead to massive civilian casualties, as there are over 1.5 million people estimated to be taking refuge in Rafah.
Look, our views on Rafah, I think, are very well known. The president's been very clear about it. I've been clear about it and repeated it as recently as yesterday. Where our focus is right now, along with the humanitarian effort, our focus right now is on getting a ceasefire and hostages home.
According to State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel, the United States has not seen a credible Israeli plan for a military operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah that would address its concerns.
Continues to be the case that we have not seen a credible plan that would address the varying areas of concerns that you've heard me talk about a number of times from up here and others, primarily the ability to address the serious humanitarian concerns surrounding.
On the other hand, a French foreign minister has told Netanyahu that an Israeli offensive in Rafah is a bad idea and will not resolve anything in the country's fight against Hamas. France hopes for peace, prosperity and de-escalation in Gaza.
France is not abandoning Israel. It is a friend of Israel. We've had a number of political discussions over the last 3 days since I started my tour in Lebanon. I stopped off in Riyadh to have a number of political discussions over the next 48 hours with the Israeli authorities.
In one of the most high-profile cases in the history of the U.S., the judge in the ongoing criminal trial against former U.S. President Donald Trump has handed down his first punishment to Trump for violating the judge's gag order.
Well, he's been fined $9,000 for 9 violations of contempt to court. Now, the judge imposed the gag order to prevent Trump from criticizing witnesses and others involved in the case. He did not want Trump to be criticizing this openly. He has also warned the former president in his written order that continued violations could also lead to imprisonment.
Okay, thank you very much. This gag order is not only unique, it's totally unconstitutional. I'm the Republican candidate for President of the United States. I received this honor in record time. Nobody's ever gone faster. It's never happened. Nobody's ever got the numbers that we got. And I'm sitting in a courthouse all day long listening to this stuff.
Well, Tuesday's ruling came at the start of the second week of testimony in the historic case, in which jurors also heard testimony from Keith Davidson, an attorney who represented both the Stormy Daniels and Karine McDougal hush money agreements back then. He recounted the negotiations in the months leading up to the 2016 election over deals for both the women.
Trump, who denies the women's claims, prosecutors hope to convict the former president on 34 felony charges of falsifying business records related to a hush money payment to Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. 77-year-old Trump has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. He claims the prosecution is a part of a plot by the Democrats aimed at preventing him from retaking the White House. In the midst of Trump's legal jeopardy, in an interview with the Time magazine, Donald Trump has set out a stark vision for an authoritarian second term, ranging from possible mass deportations of migrants by the US military and detention camps for pregnancy monitoring to enforce abortion bans. Days after adopting a law to deport irregular migrants to Rwanda, Britain has sent its first asylum seeker to the East African country.
But as of now, this is under a voluntary scheme. According to British media reports, the unnamed migrant was flown out of the country on Monday. This voluntary scheme is different from the forced deportation program Britain is about to implement in the next few months, in a bid to deter asylum seekers from crossing the English Channel in small boats to stay in Britain. Well, under the voluntary scheme, the government will pay each asylum seeker up to $3,747 to go back to Rwanda.
This new agreement is part of an existing government policy in which asylum seekers are offered financial assistance to leave Britain. But under this plan, though, the illegal asylum seekers will get the money if they agree to live in Rwanda. The measure is being taken to relocate tens of thousands of refugees who have arrived in the country since 2018. Many of them fled war or famine, traveling through Europe to Britain.
However, under the forced deportation scheme, anyone arriving illegally in Britain after January 1st, 2022 will be eligible to be deported to Rwanda. As per the official figures, over 50,000 asylum seekers so far have arrived in Britain. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has unleashed a wave of innovation on the battlefield.
Well, both sides strive to protect their tanks from deadly threats. And our next report tells you how, amidst exploding drones and relentless assaults, Moscow has unveiled a peculiar yet effective solution, the turtle tank. Take a look at this one.
Tanks have been a mainstay of warfare for over a century. Russia too sent columns of these heavy war machines in the initial weeks of its invasion of Ukraine. But these iron beasts found themselves vulnerable using guerrilla tactics. Ukrainians pinned them down, making the Russian tanks vulnerable to drone attacks. But ever since, Moscow has learned strategic lessons and is using the same tactic on Ukrainians, forcing them to remove Abraham's M1A1 battle tanks after they were being repeatedly blown up. On the other hand, Russian forces have added extra armor to their tanks. These vehicles are covered in metal armor on all sides except the front, where the main gun protrudes, resembling the head of a turtle poking out of its shell. This strange design is a direct adaptation to the specific challenges posed by Ukraine's increasing use of small explosive-laden drones against Russian armor. The turtle tanks have been spotted in various locations along the front lines, including the fierce battles around Chasiv Yar, a critical Ukrainian-held town west of Bakhmut. As the Ukrainians increasingly turn to small drones packed with explosives to target Russian vehicles, these new defensive structures have become a necessary adaptation on the ever-evolving front lines.
We have to improvise with what we have. If we don't have artillery support because they don't have shells, we have to find other ways to destroy the enemy, and drones work like nothing else. At least we can get them from somewhere.
As the Ukrainian forces wait for weapon deliveries from the west, Russian forces continue to attack. This is the moment when a number of missiles rain down in Ukraine's Odessa. The missile attack on an educational institution in a popular seafront park. The building, called the Harry Potter Castle because of its Gothic style, was seriously hit in the attack. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The World Health Organization has issued its latest bird flu warning. The agency says that there are risks of H5N1 bird flu virus spreading outside the US borders now.
WHO's warning comes after the virus was detected in cattle herds across 9 US states, which also included one human case in Texas.
Now, the highly pathogenic Asian avian influenza called the H5N1 virus primarily infects birds but can also be transmitted to humans. WHO emphasized the risk of virus spreading through migratory birds across the globe.
So the risk with regards to this virus infecting cows in other countries. So at the moment, it is considered that the virus is coming from birds to cow, and in the US, it is still under investigation whether it was a single entry point or multiple entry point from birds. But we can say it is from birds itself. Because many migratory birds, actually migratory, so they are traveling around the world, they carry viruses. Thirdly, there's a risk also spreading the virus to other regions itself.
Currently, US officials are seeking to verify the safety of milk and meat after the H5N1 virus was detected in 34 dairy cattle herds. The Food and Drug Administration Service in the country says that the pasteurization procedure is effective to kill the virus in the milk. However, experts have advised people to stay away from unpasteurized dairy goods. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has called raw milk one of the riskiest food items till date.
Earlier this month, US authorities had informed that a person working on a dairy farm in Texas was recovering from bird flu after he was exposed to infected cattle. Till now, a total of 2 bird flu cases have been reported in the United States. The first case was reported in 2022 after exposure to infected poultry.
And it's time now for a quick short break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we'll get you a story where Londoners are all set to elect a new mayor and members for the assembly. But before they do, Delhi-born businessman Tarun Gulati has surfaced as a contender against Sadiq Khan for the elections. We'll get you an interview with the mayoral hopeful right after this break.
Also on the other side, Elon Musk's wealth is on the rise again. After a significant dip earlier in 2024, his net worth has surged by $37.3 billion in just the past week. This marks his biggest weekly gain since March 2022, right before his acquisition of Twitter.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Over 200 people die following flash floods that rocked Kenya and Tanzania concurrently, with authorities announcing forceful evacuations of vulnerable residents. There is a new war front in Sudan. Brutal attacks by the Arab-dominated Rapid Support Forces on ethnic African civilians in Darfur has claimed thousands of lives. The United Nations sounds the alarm. And a former Kenyan rugby player turns into a roaming chef as he acquires TikTok fame. Dennis Ombachi will be featured on World of Africa at these times on WION World is One.
Economic turmoil and global unrest have cast a shadow over President Joe Biden's approval ratings.
The rockets are continuing to be fired by Hamas in Gaza, although at a slower rate than previously.
So, right now, we are with the volunteers from the Aleppo municipality. They are still trying to go to the rescue for the people they can find out.
India has emerged as a major diplomatic force at the world stage.
The rising cost of living in Nigeria continues to impact citizens from all walks of life.
The citizens of Gujarat witnessed a mega roadshow here in the city of Ahmedabad.
China is South Africa's largest trading partner for 134 years straight.
A domestic aircraft carrying 72 people on board crashed in Pokhara city in central Nepal.
165 injuries have been moved, 61 people are confirmed dead, and rescue operations continue around me.
After receiving an entire season's rainfall in a span of 48 hours, Chennai city has literally been brought to its knees.
For WION, World is One.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I actually pushed myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me and Shivan. And just a short while ago, we were tracking how the NYPD personnel have entered the Hamilton Hall in Columbia University. We'll, of course, be tracking that very closely on the show. But first, the headlines.
NYPD officers enter the second floor of Hamilton Hall in Columbia University, building that has been occupied by students protesting Israel's war in Gaza.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel to push for a much-awaited ceasefire between Israeli forces and Hamas in Gaza.
Netanyahu vows Rafah offensive with or without a truce deal. This as attempts are being made to try to reach an agreement for a ceasefire and hostage release.
%58 of the Israelis believe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should resign immediately, including 28% of those who voted for the bloc that supports Netanyahu. This according to a poll by broadcaster N12.
New York judge fines former President Donald Trump for repeatedly violating the gag order in the hush money trial. Also threatens jail if Trump willfully violates the gag order again.
UK returns a first failed asylum seeker to Rwanda under a voluntary removals program. Under the scheme, migrants whose claims are rejected are offered up to £3,000 to move to the East African country.
"11 days after the end of Phase 1 and 4 days since Phase 2, India's poll panel releases voter turnout data. 84% of parliamentary constituencies see declines of varying magnitude in turnout figures. Amid the escalating campus protests, dozens of helmeted police entered Columbia University on Tuesday night to arrest and disperse pro-Palestinian protesters
who have taken over the campus building nearly 24 hours earlier. While police climbed up to the second story of Hamilton Hall, around 50 officers used an elevated ramp to climb into the building through a window.
Dozens of other officers surrounded the nearby protesting site, and onlooking students standing outside the campus jeered them with shouts of "Shame, shame." Officers were also seen leading handcuffed protesters to police vehicles outside campus gates.
Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Police boarded about 50 detainees onto a bus, each of them with their hands bound behind their backs by zip. Ambulances and other emergency services vehicles stood at the rear there.
The occupation began overnight when protesters broke windows, stormed inside and unfurled a banner reading Hinds Hall, symbolically renaming the building for a 6-year-old Palestinian child killed in Gaza by the Israeli military.
And you can see the NYPD personnel in riot gear raiding the Columbia University after students rallying in support of Palestine barricaded themselves in the Hamilton building there.
The New York City mayor mentioned that these aren't all students. He's mentioned that these are external elements. And joining us live for more on this from Columbia, where NYPD continues its raid on Hamilton Hall, our correspondent Susan brings us the latest. Susan, give us a roundup of what's happening on ground. We can obviously see a lot of these visuals coming in, several police officers entering as we speak. What's the latest?
So the NYPD officers descended on Columbia just after 9 p.m. and they started clearing out those encampments. Protesters just outside of the camp were seen being placed in zip ties, as you mentioned, and special police units entered Hamilton Hall, where the protesters were occupying essentially since last night. They used a massive truck and a ramp. They entered through the window, as we saw the images. And the university had asked the NYPD to maintain a presence on campus through at least May 17th. This is 2 days after scheduled graduation. So we're going to continue to see heavy police presence over there. Earlier today, I was there all day, and the NYPD told us that they were ready to go in a lot earlier, but because Columbia is private property, they had to wait for the university to request NYPD presence to take the protesters out. One of the main concerns for the NYPD after giving the press conference this afternoon was that there are outside agitators that are inside the university, and they even do harm to those student protesters as well, so they were encouraged to disperse. When the students didn't disperse, then we saw this really hundreds of heavy police presence descending on Columbia.
Right, Susan, you're also a Columbia alumni. Just a short while ago, the NYC mayor said that the demonstrators occupying the campus building are not students and they have nothing to do with the university. What do we know about that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because all day that I've been here, it's just been absolutely shocking to see Columbia really have protesters like this descend onto it, despite the fact that it does have a history of protests. Of course, even Hamilton Hall during the 60s, protesters encamped in there. But the problem with this was the NYPD showed footage to the public during that press conference of agitators, possibly not being students, wearing all black and being some actually armed with knives and other kinds of weapons, trying to enter the university premise. This is terrifying for students that are in there who are trying to peacefully protest. Now, the university has made clear that this arrest is not because the protesters were protesting Israel's occupation of Gaza, as what they call it, but the reason that these arrests are happening is because of violation of rules and regulations, notably trespassing and occupying Hamilton Hall.
Right, Susan, like I mentioned, being a Columbia alumni, talk to us about the significance, history and the landscape of the university's Hamilton Hall, where the demonstrators have barricaded themselves, and we've seen the NYPD personnel entering the Hamilton Hall through the elevated staircase.
Hamilton Hall is basically on Amsterdam Avenue, which is a little norther than Broadway, which is the street that basically both streets encircle Columbia University. The university has a whole block. The other side that we usually see those protesters outside and those images of protests outside in the past 10 days or so, that's near the journalism school. That's very far from Hamilton Hall. Hamilton Hall is all the way opposite on Amsterdam Avenue across the campus. It's quite a walk's way to get there. But the significance of that is, first of all, it's an administrative building, and second of all, again, it's part of Columbia's private property and really has a view of where these commencement and graduation ceremonies would take place later on in May. So it's a significant location on the one hand, but it's also very close to that big lawn that we've seen tents being occupied. That lawn is where graduation ceremonies will take place. And, you know, I talked to students over there. They are so upset that their school, last month of school, has been disrupted. Columbia is an Ivy League. Tuition there is up to $90 $1,000 a year for many students. So this was really a disruption. It was absolutely shocking to see the campus in the situation that we did see it.
All right, Susan, thanks for getting us the latest there. We will be keeping in touch as the developments come in from Columbia University and other universities where we have seeing a lot of protests.
On the world of business now, in China, a nuanced picture emerges amid economic challenges as consumers adapt and industries respond.
Well, despite concerns over the country's economic slowdown and property crisis, certain sectors of the consumer goods market are displaying resilience. Take a look at this next report for more.
China's economic slowdown is impacting consumer spending, but not across the board. While beauty products and discretionary items are seeing a decline, essential goods like diapers and premium toothpaste are experiencing a slight increase. Colgate, for example, reports strong sales of their whitening toothpaste in China, highlighting a shift towards value within the essentials category. However, rural consumers are feeling the pinch more acutely, leading to softer overall sales for Colgate. Innovation is emerging as a potential bright spot. However, established players like L'Oreal and P&G are facing challenges. L'Oreal anticipates a cautious outlook for China's beauty market, while P&G reports a 30% decline in sales of their high-end skincare line due to previous consumer concerns. While P&G's diaper and alliance businesses are showing growth, their overall performance in China reflects the broader economic uncertainty. PepsiCo's observations on increased saving trends in China further underscore the cautious spending behavior of consumers. This cautiousness is a concern for investors who are closely monitoring this Chinese economy's recovery, as it's a key driver of growth for consumer-packaged goods companies worldwide, with 14% of Colgate's total sale coming from the Asia-Pacific region, which includes China. The world's second-largest economy remains a crucial market for these companies. While these are signs of resilience in specific sectors, the overall picture suggests a wait-and-see approach from both consumers and investors in China. Bureau Report, WION, World is Fun.
Elon Musk's wealth is on the rise again. After a significant dip earlier in the year, his net worth has surged by $37.3 billion in just the past week.
Right, Shivan, and this marks his biggest weekly gain since March 2022. That is right before his acquisition of Twitter. Well, the driving force behind this surge is Tesla. The electric car maker's stock price skyrocketed on news of receiving initial approval from China to deploy its driver assistance system.
This, coupled with plans for a more affordable car model, addressed investor concerns and sent Tesla shares soaring. However, it's not all smooth sailing for Musk. Tesla's performance earlier this year was lackluster, with its stock being the worst performer on the S&P 500.
Meanwhile, his Twitter acquisition, X, has seen a major drop in value, down roughly 73% since the purchase. While Tesla's recent rally has strengthened Musk's net worth, another company in his portfolio has experienced impressive growth. SpaceX, his aerospace exploration company, saw its valuation climb over 40% between mid-2022 and the end of 2023. This growth provides a counterpoint to the challenges faced by Twitter.
Domestically, Musk faces challenges regarding the $56 billion compensation package from Tesla. A Delaware court voided the initial approval, leading to a shareholder revote. Rejection could result in the loss of stock options, impacting a significant portion of his net worth. The legal battle with the SEC regarding his social media posts about Tesla also continue. Now, the Supreme Court recently rejected Musk's appeal, upholding the requirement for pre-approval of tweets by an in-house lawyer.
Let's now take a look at all the news coming in from the world of technology. Well, Microsoft is set to invest $1.7 billion in AI and cloud computing in Indonesia, making it the single largest investment in Microsoft's 29-year history in the country. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft Corporation, who is currently on an official tour in Indonesia, made the announcement during talks with outgoing President Joko Widodo.
The thing that I'm really excited to announce today is the expanded announcement of data center investments of $1.7 billion to bring the latest and greatest AI infrastructure to Indonesia. So I'm very, very excited about this. That means that we will have the world-class training inference infrastructure, whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's AMD or Microsoft's own Maya chips, will all be part of the data center infrastructure, allowing every developer to be able to train their models, do their best inference of their models through all of the infrastructure. So we're going to lead this wave in terms of the next generation of AI infrastructure that's needed.
Nadella added that the tech giant will be providing AI training to 2.5 million people in Southeast Asia, including 840,000 in Indonesia. Microsoft is trying to expand its support for the growth of AI globally, and this includes a $2.9 billion investment in cloud and AI infrastructure in Japan, and also a $1.5 billion investment in a UAE-based AI firm called G42.
A team of researchers from the University of Sydney have developed a novel chemical process that could produce sustainable aviation fuel from gases emitted from landfills. Researchers claim that the fuel can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
I think the impact is very significant because unusually you have a win-win approach here. In one sense, we have this idea that we're going to be capturing emissions that are coming from landfill. On the other, we have a sector that really needs a new technology in order to become more sustainable. The aviation industry accounts for approximately 3% of the world's emissions. So clearly, you cannot get to net zero without producing some sustainable solutions.
It is estimated that the aviation industry alone accounts for 3% of global carbon emissions.
According to a study conducted by Zscaler, a cloud security company, India recorded 79 million phishing attacks in 2023. India ranked third globally after the US and the UK. Last year, the US recorded 1.1 billion phishing attacks. Meanwhile, UK recorded over 112 million phishing attacks. The finance and insurance sector experienced the highest number of phishing attempts. As per the report, compared to 2022, in 2023, there was a 393% increase in finance and insurance sector phishing attacks globally. Meanwhile, in India, it was the tech sector which saw the highest volume of phishing attacks.